Heading into the 2013 college football season, Tajh Boyd had a lot of buzz about him. There was a lot of chatter about him being a first round pick, a lot of chatter about him being a top 10 pick in some early mock drafts. If you go back and look, maybe even suggested that he would be a top 5 pick. And then the 2013 college football season happened. Some other guys kind of burst onto the scene, and as a result, Tajh Boyd's draft stock took a hit, probably a big hit, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's the reality of the NFL draft world, if you will. When I look at Tajh Boyd as a prospect, there are some things to like, and there are some things that I clearly see that he needs some big time improvement on, and I think even Tajh Boyd would probably agree with that. The first thing I really like about his game is his arm strength. He has the arm to make every NFL throw required with ease. I love the zip on his ball in short and intermediate areas. I love his ability to fit the ball into some tight throwing windows. I love his arm strength on the deep post and the deep out. And I love his arm strength in particular in his ability to be able to stretch opposing defenses down the field vertically. Now, yeah, you could sit there and say, well, it didn't hurt that he had so much talent around him with guys like Watkins and Bryant and Williams and what have you at Clemson. It definitely didn't hurt. It can make you look really good, but Boyd has the arm to make all of the required NFL throws. He's also that kind of dual threat quarterback who can make a lot of plays with his feet. Now, he's not the most athletic quarterback, in my opinion, but does he have the ability to extend plays with his feet? Yes. Does he have the ability to pick up yardage and sometimes maybe some big yardage with his feet? Yes. I think actually people will underrate his athleticism just a little bit. I think people will underrate his ability to make plays with his feet just a little bit because they'll look at him and they'll kind of say, yeah, he's a scrambler and he can make some yards with his feet, but he's not that great at it. I think at the NFL level, he might actually surprise you a little bit. I also think his accuracy is a little bit underrated. At times, yes, he seemed to make some throws that made you go, ooh, where the hell was he throwing that ball to? But at times, he did demonstrate an ability to me to demonstrate good timing, to be able to throw receivers open, to throw to a spot, not necessarily the target, which is a key thing for an NFL quarterback to do. And he showed some great touch on some passes that suggest to me that this guy, when needed, can make that special throw at the NFL level. Like I said, he made some really nice throws during his college career that made me sit there and say, wow, his accuracy on that was outstanding. It would be nice if it was a little more consistent, yes, but he does show that potential to do that. Now, in terms of some of the weaknesses or flaws in his game, people are going to look at his size. And, I sit there and say a guy's 6'1", about 220 pounds. He doesn't have the prototype size, but I do think he has enough size to be an NFL starting quarterback. Not every NFL starting quarterback has to be 6'4", 6'5". They just don't. His pocket presence, at times, it felt like he wilted a little bit in the face of pressure. At other times, it seemed like when the pressure would come at him, he would bail out too quickly, and he would try to go to his feet too quickly instead of maybe trying to sit tight, maybe step up in the pocket or move left or move right to buy himself some additional time. Buying yourself additional time is not always about rolling all the way to the right or all the way to the left. His decision making, I thought, was shaky at best at times. He threw into some bad spots. He made some bad decisions. He made some bad throws. I think his mechanics could use some work too. There are times where he loses integrity with his arm angle and he almost throws sidearm, especially when he's on the move. I think he could utilize his lower body better in his throwing motion. He just doesn't use his legs a whole lot. It's just like a pitcher in baseball. It's not always about the arm strength itself, and it's not always about that arm when it comes to throwing a pitch. A lot of the power pitchers, you'll notice, their upper bodies aren't necessarily always huge. It's their lower bodies and the strength that they have there and the torque that they generate by utilizing their entire body and getting that involved with the throwing motion. So I look at Tajh Boyd and I say, could his arm strength be even better than what I see if he utilized better mechanics, if he kept the integrity and stayed over the top of the ball more, which also I think affects his accuracy at times by going sidearm. If he utilized his entire body, would it improve his accuracy and his arm strength a little bit? And I think that's very true. I think his field vision is shaky at best, something that definitely needs some work. There were times where he did demonstrate the ability to go through progressions. Now, maybe part of this, to be fair to him, is because when you have guys like Watkins and Bryan and Williams, a lot of times you find that first read's going to be open. So why do you need to go through that second or third read? Well, in the NFL, even when you have those great weapons to throw to, they're not always going to be open. So you're going to have to go through your progressions. You're going to have to hit your check down. And that's something that I think Boyd is going to need some work on. He's also going to have some questions about his durability. He's a tough kid, and I really like that. I think he's a very tough individual, somebody that I would like in my locker room, that I would like leading my team on the field because of his toughness. But you figure this is a kid that played his senior year of high school with the torn ACL, so that's always going to be a bit of a question, especially when you factor in his size. When I look at Tajh Boyd, to me it's kind of a shame that his draft stock has dropped like it has. I've seen some people talk about the fact that he might be a fifth or sixth round pick, and I saw something about a Packers scout saying that the guy wasn't draftable, which I thought was completely ridiculous. But if you're a Tajh Boyd and you hear somebody say that, hey, Tony Romo hasn't had a terrible career and he was undrafted. Kurt Warner's going to go to the Hall of Fame and he was undrafted. You think about those guys and you sit there and say, okay, well, guys, I think like Jeff Garcia were undrafted. And, you just think about that. Warren Moon was undrafted. Just because you're undrafted doesn't have to be the end of the road by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. But I don't think Tajh Boyd will go undrafted. I would assume that his draft stock and his draft range is going to fall anywhere between rounds 3 to 5. And a team maybe like the Oakland Raiders or the Minnesota Vikings might be looking at this kid a little bit later in the draft. I think, to me, I would be confident taking a Tajh Boyd anywhere between rounds 3 and round 4, sitting there saying to myself, he could be a future starter. He's probably not ready to start yet in the NFL. I don't think that's the case, but he does have that type of upside. The things that he needs to work on, he can work on and he can improve on. But the things like the mobility and the arm strength that he possesses, that he has, are things that you just can't coach, you just can't teach. If you can coach and teach those other things, and if he's a coachable kid, you might have yourself a bit of a steal, which reminds me of somebody like a Russell Wilson, who is ultimately who I compare Tajh Boyd to. The only reason Russell Wilson really wasn't a first round pick was because of his size. Let's not mistake ourselves here. Now, Russell Wilson, I think, was a more complete player and he had more things going for him. I thought he had better pocket presence and decision making and mechanics and accuracy and field vision than Tajh Boyd, yes. But there are some similarities in their game. When I watch Russell Wilson and then I watch Tajh Boyd, sometimes it does feel like I'm watching a very, very similar player. Tajh Boyd's overall physical grade for me is a 64.5, which again puts him above Manziel, if that means anything, but doesn't put him at the top of the list at all. But I do like Tajh Boyd, and I hope things go well for him, and I hope a team does take a chance on him in the third or fourth round because they might ultimately be pleased with the results down the road.